One of the most dramatic cases of demonic possession that we've had on the podcast so far, the connection between the BLM movement, entertainment industry, and Umbanda spiritism, and more on this week's Spirit Answers podcast. Well, I am very, very excited to have on the podcast today Ivani Greppy, if I can get the book in the camera there. Author of the book Cast Out, just came out this year. We will get to that novel here in a little bit. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure and an honor to have you on. So we will get to the book, like I said, here shortly. But before we do, I want to go into your background and your testimony a little bit. And it's a really fascinating one. Ends with one of the most traumatic deliverances I've ever experienced just in my research. But before we get to that part of your testimony, your story and coming to a relationship with Jesus Christ really starts with the spiritual doorways that were opened up in your family lineage. So can you kind of take us through those beginning years in your life and how that was with those different spiritualities growing up?
Yes. I was born in Brazil, and my family, my grandparents, great-grandparents were immigrants from Spain, from Italy. And they already brought with them the belief system that we call spiritism, that there were mediums and healers. So my Italian great-grandmother did more of the healing, not so much the medium part where you become possessed by a spirit. But my Spanish side did. They already practiced, that type of spiritism. And I grew up, I was born into this family that had many generations before of practicing spiritism.
And from what I understand, it's really interesting that when it comes to spiritism, I think many Christians don't understand, especially people that have been Christians, excuse me, for their whole life. They don't understand how people could be involved in this in these different spiritualities. But what I think is really fascinating with your story is that your family, going back generations, they were having some quote successes with these different spiritual backgrounds in terms of quote helping people. And I believe one of them was able to I believe your grandfather able to help find someone. Was that right?
Yes, my dad's dad, when he was a little boy, he wasn't considered a medium, but he had what they called in Brazil divisions. I guess it would be the same thing here, visions. And there was someone in the neighborhood that was missing for a long time. The horse took off, and he was able to visualize where the man was, and they found him. And also the story about the piglets. He saw the little pigs being killed by a fox. They had pigs in the yard in a little pen. And when they went to check, the pigs were fine. The little piglets were fine. But later on that night, everything that he predicted came true. And we believed this to be a gift for any contact with the spirit world, or having premonitions, or being able to predict things was considered a gift. But as we go on with your talk, we'll be able to explain that unfortunately these are just they're not gifts, they're tricks that demons use to make us believe in them and worship them, thinking that they're good when they're not, when they're really just trying to keep us away from the gospel, from God, because it's a very tangible, powerful means of control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. The enemy is very crafty. He knows exactly what he needs to do in order to deceive us. And it becomes very, very challenging when you're having these quote successes. People are quote being helped, and you're in even outside of this. We've seen before. We talked about before on the show, people being healed, so to
Yeah.
speak, and it's very, very confusing when you're
Mhm.
not raised in that biblical foundation of truth to have that discernment. But with yourself, you also had some abilities then, and another thing we've talked about before on the show is the family lineage passing down certain abilities from generation to generation as it relates to these different spiritual practices, opening up doorways and bringing in, like, for example, with yourself, clairvoyant abilities. And so that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about with yourself, was that were you also trained in these types of different clairvoyant abilities, or were these just different traits that were passed along to you by way of your family?
There was no training because I grew up in it. It was part of our lives.
Mm,
And then some people in the family were considered. I was considered to be born with a gift because from little, as far back as I can remember, I saw spirits, or what we call shadow people. They call shadow people here in Brazil. We call them vultos. They're just shadowy um, humanoid forms that would walk around. And I saw this all day long. It wasn't like I would see it once in a while. It was like I was in the physical and the spiritual, and it was terrifying for a little kid. But to my family, it was considered a gift because they felt that I had. Not everybody was a medium in my family. Everybody believed in the spiritism that we practiced, but not everybody was a medium. My mother was never considered a medium, even though she had strong clairvoyant, I guess, talents, you could say. But I was born already seeing these entities and not understanding, but was always told by my family, and especially my grandmother and my great grandmother, my grandfather, who were mediums, that this was a gift. And I was too little. And as I grew, eventually I would be able to be trained to receive the spirits like they did and help people to
mm,
heal and so forth. So there was no training specifically when I was little. I was already born with being able to visualize, to see, not so much hear all the time. Most of the time there was no sound. Occasionally there were when I was waking up, but it's just and also having the ability to foresee certain things. These are tricks that demons, put into my mind, or they whisper into your ears. It wasn't anything that I had. It was not a gift. It wasn't from God. It wasn't. It was just something that was physically and spiritually put there by these beings that were surrounding us, because we were dedicated from birth to to demons without really realizing. Like you said, my parents were the most wonderful, caring people. My grandparents, great grandparents, they were loving. Nobody was doing, anything to harm anybody as far as the spiritual part. There's some religions that do, they do the voodoo type of thing. And,
mhm,
they were totally against that. And we even talked about Jesus and God, but we didn't believe in the Bible,
mm,
because the Bible that we believed in was written by a spiritist who was from France, Allan Kardec, and that's we were called Kardecists, and that's what we followed. And it's the white magic, like you would call it here. Only good spirits were allowed to communicate with us. But as you know, these spirits that that it can manifest as a grandparent or as an angel of light, like the Bible says.
mhm,
And it's all demons. They're all demons, and they know everything about us. They've been here since before we were made, before man was created. So Satan, he's and his demons, they can read like body language. Maybe I don't know if demons can read minds, but I know that they're very, very astute as far as humans, we can't compare our intelligence to theirs. And they've been around forever, so they know what happened years before. And as far as predicting the future, the way I look at it is sometimes that they not necessarily, I don't know if that they can predict the future, but I believe that they can create the future that they predicted to make us believe even more. Oh, you're going to have an accident. Be careful. Your tire's going to blow. And, they do create, as uh, physical problems as far as even technical problems when you're doing your show. A lot of times you have interference. So they have the ability to do things like that. And so I don't believe so much that demons have the power to see into the future, but they can create certain events that look like they predicted it, and or the medium predicted it. So,
and I want to go back to something real quick, and I appreciate you bringing this up, which is that we call these like talents or abilities, but we use that term very loosely because even though there are these different quote positive things that are happening as a result of what's going on in the spiritual realm and the gifts that the demons are providing, they come at a cost. And for you, just understanding the little bit that that I know about your background and your story, you were tormented perhaps more than most I know that are in that practice these different spiritual beliefs. And so, can you take us through some of the different things that you had experienced growing up there in Brazil? And if you like, I know when you moved to America as well. And then eventually you move back to Brazil. But just in your childhood, what were some of the different things that you experienced from a spiritual perspective as it relates to some of these shadow beings or some of these manifestations that you saw that were because even though you did have these clairvoyant traits, you were also being tormented as a result. It was a give and take. So what was going on here as it relates to some of these different experiences?
Yeah, I never understood. As a child, I would be so afraid because I could see, like I said, there are people that in my family, my sister, for example, she would see, not all the time, but we shared a couple of incidents that we both saw spirits at the same time. But it wasn't a constant thing. With me, for some reason, it was constant. Even my mother believes even when I was born, I was already seeing things because as a baby, my eyes would track around the room and then I would cry, terrified. So I don't know, Alex, why I was, the torment came from fear. I was very, very afraid of these things. And I felt that it was always trying to hurt me because I felt like it was always like right behind me. Like that sensation when you're walking and you feel like somebody's about to come up behind you and grab you. I had that constant feeling. I would be in school and all of a sudden I would feel that thing just come behind me, or it was just there lingering. I would wake up with, this horrible dark, being just hovering over me. And my mother, it was a constant thing. I would cry out every night in fear. And I lived in Brazil until I was 9. So until I was 9 in Brazil, this was a constant thing. So the way my parents and my grandparents dealt with it, my grandparents were mediums. My great grandmother was a medium. They would bless me and they would do the roux behind the ear, the herbal baths to clear of negative energy and all that. But they knew that I needed more. So we would go to the Kardecist Center where we called it Mesa Branca, which is white table, which was like seances. So the mediums would sit around the table and the guests who were called patients would be sitting around the room or standing around the room, and the medium would receive their spirit guides, and the spirit guide would tell my mother what was going on. So it was the same story all the time. She's a medium. She's too young. The spirits want to communicate through her because she has this gift, and she's too little to understand. When she gets older, she'll be able to develop as a medium, and she's going to have strong powers to help people, blah, blah, blah. It was like always the same thing. So The help for the attacks were like incense, clearing the house of negative energy, lighting candles, making offerings. Um, and then after, your question triggered that, because I went to the Bible and I thought, is there something that I can find in the Bible? Why? Because I'm not the only person that's gone through this. Obviously, there are many, unfortunately, children that have experienced these, like you said, tormenting, or adults that were tormented by spirits. Many people. I'm sure you've interviewed or have heard, read testimonies of people that have gone through this. So I looked up Mark chapter 1, verses 23, 28, and then I went through Mark, Matthew, and Luke, and I looked at all the times that Jesus did deliverances and cast out demons. So it was such a variety of levels, I guess you could say. Like, there was a demonically possessed man that walked in a synagogue, and Jesus just cast the demon out immediately right there and then. And we didn't know too much about this man, but he was possessed. He walked into the synagogue and he was delivered there. Then there was the man that was blind, deaf, and mute. So you got the spiritual with the physical, which hopefully we can talk a little bit about that, because of the mental health thing. I would really be interested in talking, because a lot of people believe that it's all mental, chemical imbalance in the brain that causes these things, that um, you're having, I can't remember the correct term, but when you see things that aren't there,
Oh yeah,
not
hallucinations.
hallucinations. And then other people believe it's drug induced. Other people believe that, but it could be. I'm a nurse. I'm a registered nurse, so of course I believe that there's chemical imbalances that causes mental health issues and things like that. But one of the main problems, and I don't want to get off track, but one of the main problems is that everything needs to be addressed, not just the physical or the mental. But going back to the Bible, and then the man that was possessed by thousands of demons, that he called legion, and they were delivered to these demons were sent into the herd of pigs or swine. And the difference between this man and the others is that he told this man to go and tell his friends what the Lord had done, and how the Lord had compassion for him. And the difference also with this one was the only time that Jesus asked who he was, what his name was, and he said Legion. The other ones, Jesus didn't even let them speak or ask them any questions. And then there was the little girl, the daughter of a Kenite woman, that she asked Jesus to cast. We don't see him doing it, but because of the woman's faith, Jesus delivered her. And Mary Magdalene had 7 demons. And then there's a little boy that got cast into the fire and foamed at the mouth, and the parents were begging Jesus to deliver him. And he would physically get hurt by these demonic beings. So that kind of gave there are more, I'm sure, a lot more um, verses that talk about the different demonic possession. But I read that and I thought, I don't know if I can give you a clear answer. All I can say is what my family believed, is that I was like a magnet. Like, I was born with this gift that they called gift, and the spirits were just waiting to be able to communicate with me, and they didn't realize that I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't prepared, because you're supposed to be at least old enough to be able to control the spirits, because you willingly become possessed. So this is how you call on these spirits to possess you, so you can, they can talk. Like, if it's a spirit guide or if it's an ancestor spirit, they'll give the message to whoever is seeking help.
Mm-hmm.
So we got, and you mentioned healing. We believed, and yes, people did get healed from fevers. We didn't go to the doctor. It was rare. I don't remember ever going to the doctor when I was little in Brazil. We went to the pharmacist, and they did give us shots for when we were very sick. But most of the healing was through spirits. And Yeah, and my cousin was born. He was in the hospital. He had it was the bloody diarrhea. It was an infection, and the doctors couldn't heal him, and they just told my aunt, take him home and just wait because he's going to die. You can't. He's not going to make it. There's nothing else we can do. He was a newborn, and my aunt, you know, of course, my grandparents were blessing him and doing everything that we knew that spiritual that could be done. But there was a spiritist, a medium there that was he was called a sailor. The spirit that he received was a sailor, and he did surgery. I don't know if you've ever seen that, the spiritual surgery
I have
that they
not.
you haven't. That's really interesting because they actually do, like, they cut into people and like they scrape people's eyes and without anesthesia for cataracts, and people don't even blink. It's just crazy. It's
Wow.
demonic, and yes, people do get healed, but like you said, there's a price because the more you feel, my aunt for almost her entire life, praise God, now she's delivered. She had deliverance as well because she was part of the, she was also a medium, and she believes she gave her life to Christ and was set free. But up until then, until we realized what happened, she believed that this was a good spirit, and it was very hard to turn around and say, "Oh, we can't believe in this anymore," because we saw with our own eyes miracles happen. But there was always, it's not like Jesus Christ. He died for us on the cross, and the miracles that he does every day, that he still does miracles, he doesn't ask for anything in return, but these spirits did. You had to constantly worship them and give them um, offerings, and it's a constant thing. And then coming back to America, you asked how it was as far as, am I kind of going out of our out
Oh
of
no, no,
place?
you're fine. You're fine. Yeah. So any experiences that you wanted to talk about either in Brazil or America?
Mhm. Yeah, it continued. It was the same when I came to America. I was 9, and I continued that nothing changed. I continued seeing spirits, everywhere, and we learned right away because I had family here in America. My great grandmother, was here since she was a little girl. That's a long story. It's in the book because it's very complicated. But my great grandmother was very Catholic, and they didn't believe in any of these things, and it was shunned. And right away, we were told, don't talk about these things here in America because nobody believes in it and they're going to think you're crazy. So I lived until I was 14. I was, yeah, 5 years in Massachusetts, and we just did what we could as far as what we believed would help. Like I said, the incense burning, the herbal baths. My grandmother would intercede in Brazil in their own, spiritual, doing the spiritual um, prayers over there, and sending us book to study because she felt that I had to understand Kardec, Ellen Kardec's. Well, it's not called a Bible, but it's the Gospel according to Spiritism. There's 4 books that he wrote. So I studied those, and but then when I got older, I was still scared. I was very scared because I still felt that horrible, evil that would kind of sneak up on me. And one thing that I forgot to mention, being little, even up to teenager, I could not go in a room by myself. I was always so afraid. And my sister would have to come, with me. And she's 11 months younger than I am. And she would just get so tired of having to put up with, having to babysit me basically. And even, kids would even tease me in Brazil because I was afraid to play hide and seek, because I was afraid to go under bed or inside a closet or things like that. So it affected me tremendously. But, my family always reinforced the fact that it was okay. So I kept going. And then in America, as I got older, I think that I started to feel like maybe I had some powers, and you know like in school I started testing different things, and you know I had excellent grades. I went, when I came back to America, I went through high school in 2.5 years because I had missed um, 2 years, a year and a half of school. And when I came back, almost 2 years, when I came back, they allowed me to catch up, and I did. I went to school, and I don't think it's because I'm so intelligent. And I did study and I did my work, but I sometimes I would ask for these spirits to help me. So as I got older, I started interacting more as far as maybe uh, testing to see if I could, if they were there. And so I wasn't as afraid of them anymore. It was more of an interest in how, if I had this power, how I could use it. And going back to Brazil, when I was 14, that's when I was indoctrinated into the Umbanda religion. And that's when I became an Umbanda medium, that I would become possessed by these spirits that were called, they were deities that we worshiped. So.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that here in just a second. Before we get to that, I wanted to ask one more question about your upbringing, which was really fascinating to me when I was looking at your testimony. And you also, I think you had mentioned this before, had the ability at times to process other people's thoughts and hear them in your own mind. And many people would think that this is a very cool thing, a very seductive thing. People would want this quotability, but it also came with a downside. And so, can you tell us what that was like? The downside of understanding information that maybe was hurtful to you at that time.
Yeah, especially being young. When I was a little girl, I couldn't process a lot of the things that were kind of revealed to me, and it it was, I you think you're reading somebody's mind, but it's like your mind is being, this demon is putting things into your mind. And like I said, they can read body language. They know what's going on behind the scenes because they see, they know your history, they know your family's history. So I was not prepared as a little girl because I didn't understand some of the things that was revealed to me. And it's scary and it's sad because you grow up too fast in a way that you become disappointed. And children need to have a certain type of innocence, and a lot of that was taken away from me as far as knowing things that kids should know, little things that. And then when I became older, it affected my relationship very much with my husband. I started dating my husband when I was 16. And he's older. He's a little older. Of course, he had many girlfriends before I did. And just things would come up to my head, and I would literally, like, I mean, this is one example. He had a van and he worked night shift, and then we went on the weekend where we were on a date, and I just sat on the chair on my chair, and as soon as I sat, I had like this image just flashed in my mind of a girl sitting where I was sitting, and it was so real. It was like, I just looked at him and I said, who sat here? And he just looked at me and he said, what are you talking about? And I said, there's a girl that sat here in this chair and she had brown hair, and I described her. And then I reached back and I found like a hair clip or something. And I was like, is this hers? Whoa. So I was very insecure, and I was very paranoid. And I was always, because, this information that, I mean, to me, that made me always feel like I knew too much that I didn't. And he said, this is a girl I work with. We went to get lunch for everybody. It's not a big deal. But to me, it was always a big deal because, my trust was always like, I never really trusted people. Mm-hmm. And it was so, no, it's not a good thing at all. Mm-hmm. And it can cause, because demons lie as well. Satan's the father of lies, and they'll lie to get whatever they want from you, to even seek them for more information. And it's sad. You don't want that. It's seductive, but you don't want that.
Yeah. And I would think just incredibly overwhelming. I would think it'd be overwhelming as an adult, let alone as a
A child.
child. That's a
Mhm.
lot to process, a lot of thoughts that you don't understand, and then a lot of thoughts coming your way on
Mhm.
top of your own thoughts. I would think things would get cluttered very, very quickly.
Oh yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
So you had mentioned already the Umbanda spiritism that you got into, and so I think it's really fascinating because many people probably listening to this are not familiar with that,
Mhm.
and it you were already involved in different spiritual practices, but this was very unique even
Mhm.
compared to what you were doing already. And so, can you explain to us what Umbanda spiritism is and how you got involved with that?
Yes. It's very common in Brazil. Actually, Umbanda is from Brazil. It started in the early 1900s from a young man that was a medium in what I mentioned earlier, the white table where they do the seance type of thing. And the story is that while he was, and they also always mention that only spirits of light could come. We know they're not. We know they're demons, but the while practicing in this temple or this house of prayer, they called. It's kind of like a church, but mostly it's a table. It looks like a seance. He became, he received, you don't say possessed. You don't become possessed. You receive the spirit, and he received the spirit of uh, Indian that to the people around the table that wasn't considered a spirit of light. So he started Umbanda, and then Umbanda is based on spiritism, Kardecism, that I practiced, my family practiced for many, many generations, and then um, for many years actually. And then the Umbanda um, was mixed with Candomblé, which is, there are three main religions in Brazil that are close to Umbanda. It's Umbanda, Candomblé, and Kimbanda. The difference is they worship all the same gods, and I'll go into a little bit detail about that in a minute. But Umbanda, there's no animal sacrifice, so there's no blood offerings. The other two, yes, you do, just like in voodoo. So um, this faith and this practice came from the African slaves that were brought to Brazil by the Portuguese colonists. So in Africa, what they practiced was called Ifa, the Yoruba people, and they're from West Africa. So they were enslaved. They came to Brazil and they continued with their belief system. They're Afro-Brazilians. They continued while slaves. They, of course, they believed in their gods. Gods. So each god would represent an element, like god of thunder, god of um, the mountains, of the lightning, different elements, goddess of the sea. They're goddesses and gods, and they also worship ancestor spirits. So this young man with Umbanda mixed the white table, Kardecism, spiritism with Candomblé, which like I said, came from Africa. And then Brazil is not unique to this because with the African diaspora, that's where pretty much every country has this belief system. Here in the United States, it's just coming up front to the front and center because it was mostly practiced by Afro Americans. And I think just like we believed that it wasn't going to be accepted, it was kept more private. It's a very, it's African religion. And it spread to the Caribbean, spread to all the Americas. So the difference is just what it's called and a little bit of how the rituals are done. But the same deities are worshipped and the same belief system is in place. So if you talk about voodoo, that is from mainly from Haiti and it's also here in Saint. Oh my goodness, I just blanked on the name of where they practice a lot of voodoo here in the United States. Um,
Is
well,
it
well,
is it
New
in
Orleans. I'm sorry, New
New Orleans?
Orleans.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's very common there, voodoo, and because it was colonized by the French, and the French colonized Haiti, and that's the same. Does it make sense? Because it's all the African slaves that came wherever they went, they brought this religion with them. So same thing with the Caribbean and other South American countries where they have Santeria, and there are other names, but it's all the same. It's all pretty much the same. The rituals may change a little bit. Like I said, in Umbanda, there's no animal sacrifices, but the belief system is exactly the same from Ifa back in Africa thousands of years ago.
Hmm.
So
One of the things that I know was alluring to you about this was that there was a specific deity, I believe, that you really had a fascination with, which was actually a demonic one. But what was fascinating was that it was one that you also, as a practicer of Umbanda spiritism, worship, because it wasn't so clear cut. This demonic deity was also one that was supposed to be a protector.
absolutely, they're all the spirit guides are to protect you. They None of the spirit guides mean you harm. So when I didn't understand this, when I first attended a temple, I was told by the head medium, the main priest. They're called priests in Umbanda. That I had, because you have more than one, like lineage. You have more than one spirit guide, but you have the main spirit guide, and he told me that he saw my spirit guide was Yemanja, which Yemanja is the goddess of the sea, and we'll talk about this later. But that's who Beyonce worships and becomes possessed by it. There's Yemanja, and there's another spirit that she becomes possessed. She literally becomes possessed with, and state she's mentioned that before, and she worships.
Wow.
So it's all the same God, same, and you know, it's very attractive because you have it's very colorful. When you walk in, it's the temple is an open space. Sometimes it's just dirt, sometimes it's just cement, and they have the altar. And like I mentioned to you earlier, before we started, that because the slaves were forced to convert to Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, and worship the saints, they would make that saint, for example, Yemanja was their goddess of the sea, would connect with um, Mary. Shango, the god of thunder and lightning, and he's a warrior. He would be connected to, I can't remember if it's, I have it all written down in my booklet, my testimony booklet. He was connected to Saint Joseph, one of the saints. So basically, what it's syncretized. So all these religions, spiritism, it syncretizes with Catholicism, and you do believe in Jesus. They talk about Jesus, but not the Jesus of the Bible. We have our own Jesus, because the Jesus of the Bible, or the God of the Bible, is not the God that they believe in, because they believe that God, the omniscient God, would not do certain things that the Bible says that he did. So it cancels out the Bible. The spiritism, candomblé, umbanda, all these religions, even New Age, it makes the Bible not necessary, because
Mhm.
you get all your answers from these spirits, and you have your own version of who God and Jesus is, which is totally not the biblical Jesus, the historical Jesus. It's a totally different Jesus, like the New Age Jesus that a lot of people believe in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A little bit of truth mixed with a lot of seductive lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Hmm.
How then? So you're going through these practices in this in Umbanda spiritism. How then did you go from practicing this to that really dramatic deliverance?
Well, that became my life. Umbanda, as a teenager, and we would go twice a week, but we volunteered. Just like they do a lot of charity work. We would go to the favelas, where the ghettos, and bring food, bring clothes to people. So we did a lot of good works, and it was very, like, you mentioned how seductive it can be, like the music. There were drums, there were music, candles, flowers, incense. One thing that I forgot to mention, in Umbanda, once a month, these deities that were considered, they're not called demonic, but they're demonic because they look demonic, and they were the guardians, they were the dark forces that guarded the temple. So you were obligated to worship them once a month. It was on a Thursday, and they did possess the mediums there. And it was incubus and succubus. I think it was the closest that would make sense to people that are not familiar with Umbanda. So they would possess people, and it was very sensual and sexual, and there was smoking, there was drinking, and it was close to the public, obviously. And it was not, it was pretty heavy. So that was obligated once a month, so they would leave us alone and not disturb the white, the good spirits, the spirits of light, that spirit guides that we worshipped throughout the month. So, but going back to how did I get from that to being saved and having my deliverance, it's a God is, he just did something beautiful in our lives. We came back to America about 2 years later, and uh, almost 2 years later. Yeah, I had just turned 16 when I came back to America, and when I started dating my husband and everything. My husband, by the way, has the same background as I do. His grandmother was a priestess in a temple of not Umbanda, of Candomblé, which they do the animal sacrifices and so forth. So he's very familiar with everything that I experienced. But once I came to America, because I was developing as a medium and I was receiving my spirit guides, and there's that training period, I still wasn't firmly completely done with my training that they called. It had been about 2 years, and even though I was already giving the healing, what we called healing passes, but the energy healing and all that, it was always under inside the temple with the supervision of the main priest and so forth. Not allowed to do this on your own at home, because they said it was dangerous. Of course, it's dangerous. You're being possessed by a demon, but we didn't know that, and it physically. I mean, you sweat. You just become physically exhausted from going through this possession phase. So when I was told, and I'm very seriously, do not even attempt to receive your spirits or to do anything on your own while you're there, unless you find uh, a temple, which in Massachusetts back then, again, it was in the 70s, there was no way. I didn't know. Now here in the United States, there's so many Brazilians and Caribbean, Cubans. You can go pretty much anywhere in the United States, and you'll be able to walk into a temple, Umbanda temple, Candomblé temple, Santeria temple, all the same thing, and practice. But back then, we lived in a very small town in Massachusetts, and we didn't know anybody. We didn't, so I just obeyed, but I continued worshiping, my spirit guides. I had the statues. I had a little altar in my room, and even after I got married, I continued worshiping them with songs and lighting candles. And the belief system never, it was that's what we believed 100%. It was like our DNA. So and I continue to see, spirits. I continue to have the sensation of being, followed. Sometimes it wasn't as bad as when I was little, because I felt like I had more control, and I had my spirit guides to protect me, which I would call on. But I was still, I could say I was very oppressed to the point that when as I got older and I had my children and everything, unfortunately, I would have, thoughts of not, suicidal thoughts. It wasn't constant, but I had them, because these spirits oppress you so much that they want to kill you. They want to take your soul for, damnation forever. But my parents had a printing shop in Kissimmee, Florida. They still do. It's still open. My sister runs it now with my brother-in-law. It's very small. It's a family business. And we had a sign on the door. We speak Portuguese and Spanish, English, of course. And a pastor had just arrived from Brazil. And this pastor was a missionary pastor that was brought by the Methodist Church in Kissimmee because there's so many Brazilians moving to the area, Florida. So they felt like there was a need for a Portuguese speaking pastor. And he came, he was invited to come. And he went to the printing shop to get some business cards done. And my sister was working. I was a nurse at the time. Had already finished, because I went to nursing school when I was a little bit older. So I was in the beginning of my career as a nurse. And he talked to my sister. Long story. This is a long story. It's in my testimony, but I know I'm taking a little bit longer to get to the point. But right away, he told my sister, about Christ. She told him what was going on. There was a lot of problems going on in our family. My nephew, who's only 17, was doing drugs. My son was already getting into drugs, and I found out later. Praise God, they both got delivered from that. They stopped. They became Christians. They gave their life to Christ later, as we all did. But my nephew was also had impregnated his girlfriend, who was very young. So my sister was in her 30s, and she was late 30s, and all this was, he quit school. He was a very smart kid, and he just gave up college. Everything just kind of happened at once, and her life changed, and she was so scared for her son's future and so forth. But so she opened up to him, and he prayed with her, and he said that he would like to meet the rest of the family, and he was opening up a church, and he would love to have us come and so forth. And I could not stand being around any Christians. I couldn't stand anything about church. I thought it just gave me, it was like repelling to me, because of how demonized I was, that, anything that was true from God would repel me away from it. So my sister called me, and she told me what happened. And she said after he prayed, she felt so much peace that she knew everything was going to be okay. And she wanted to become a Christian. She became a Christian, gave her life to Christ. And I thought, what is going on here? This is insane. We don't believe in that. Christianity is crazy. These people are all crazy. And we know the truth, spiritism, that's it. And she said, well, I'm having him over. I'd like you to meet him. I was, no. But eventually I ended up coming to her house to meet the pastor. And I couldn't stand him right away. I was so demonically oppressed. And as soon as I met him, I knew there was something that was very strong spiritually. And we had coffee and everything. And before he left, he asked me a lot of questions. And I was, again, it's in my testimony, I was very angry. I didn't want anything to do with him. But the last thing he did was, well, I'm going to leave, but let me pray. And this is when he started praying. And I never heard of deliverance. The only thing I knew was exorcism, like, the movie, The Exorcist. And I never heard of deliverance, of casting out demons. I never read the Bible once in my life. And as soon as he started praying, I became possessed. It was, and I don't remember a lot of it. Because you kind of go in and out of consciousness when you're possessed. And it was horrifying for my family because they had never seen, my husband had never seen this happen to me, because it would happen in the temple. But like I said, I came back when I was 16, and he had never seen me receive my spirit guide. And he said I was, for the few moments or minutes, I don't know how long it took, that I became possessed when the pastor's praying. She said I was all distorted. I was walking backwards, and all kind of just really, really scary. And when he told me, I was looking at him like he was crazy, because I couldn't remember. I just remember crying and wanting to be away from him. So after that, when that passed and I was crying, they gave me water and I didn't know what was going on. I vomited, which is part of some deliverances. I didn't know that was either. I had no idea. And he told us, you're demonically possessed. You need to be delivered. And I didn't want anything to do with it. It took a little while, but a lot of prayer, a lot of fasting. And eventually I accepted, because my son, there was a second time that he came, because my husband said, can he at least come and pray for the house? We had a lot of things that happened in my house in Kissimmee. Even the children, my kids who were my daughter was 11, my son was 13, 14, maybe 14 at the time. And they were feeling and hearing things in the house, and they would not go in my room. I didn't know this until later, that they refused. They were petrified to go in my room by themselves, because they felt like a horrible force there, something that was not good. And we didn't believe in, we didn't believe in demons or anything like that. So, and there were a lot of noises that happened throughout the night, and it kept getting worse, especially after the pastor came. There were like things falling, breaking, and you could wake us, everybody up, and we couldn't find anything. Just crazy stuff kept happening. And my husband said, can you at least come and pray, and bless the house? Because we were still in that, mentality that, there's contamination, and bad spirits need to go, good spirits need to stay. So the pastor came to my house after a lot of, conversation. Yes, no, I didn't want anything to do with him. He came. And my son saw this happen again. It happened again. And I think this time was worse. But I wasn't willing to give it up. I didn't believe that it was bad. I believed that that was my spirit guide, and that he was the one fooling everybody. But after he left, my son was horrified, and my nephew too. My nephew experienced it. My nephew said that his hairs on his arm just stood on end, because I looked at them. They were upstairs, leaning over the stairs, looking at what was happening downstairs while the pastor was praying. And my nephew said that I just looked up at them with these black eyes and just mouthed to them, help me. And I don't remember this, but it was the demon messing with them. And my son and my nephew said, please, do whatever this pastor's saying, because it was scary. And they described it to me. And every time my nephew would tell me, his hair would just stand on end. And so finally, there were other things that happened, but finally God showed me that I needed to, it got to the point that I knew that this, whatever it was not good. It was harming me. It was harming my family. And I needed to get rid of it. And the only way to get rid of it was through Christ. And the pastor, because he was from Brazil, because he was well versed on spiritism and Umbanda and Candomblé and all these belief systems, because he came from that as well before becoming a pastor, he believed in these things. Like I said, it's very common in Brazil. So he knew exactly what he was dealing with, and he was able to address it. And then my deliverance, I don't know if you want me to talk about that now or not.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm. So, there was preparation for deliverance. He asked, I can't say that I had converted yet, because I was still being possessed and I was still oppressed, and I still kind of held on to that. It was still hard for me to let go. And I was doing it kind of forcibly at the time, and but then at the same time, it was very confusing. It was scary because my family had converted. They were new Christians. They were learning, and they didn't even know how to pray. And we didn't know anything about the Bible, but he had everybody pray and fast, and he didn't want anybody in my house except myself, him, and his wife. And then my sister was allowed to come, and I didn't know my sister was there throughout this process. But it was the same thing. So he and his wife started praying for me when they arrived. And before they arrived, I was so influenced by the spiritual being, this demon, that I literally decided that I wasn't going to stay in the house. And I picked up my keys and I ran out to open the door. And when I opened the door, he was already standing there. It was like, run, run, run. You know, it was really telling me to get out. And so when they came in, everybody, like I said, I was fasting too. That was the first time I ever fasted in my life. I had no idea what fasting was. I mean, we did it for certain events with the Umbanda, but you know, I never knew that other people did it. So, but this was complete fasting, you know, 24 hours before, and I couldn't pray. He had given me a Bible. I couldn't read it. You know, it was impossible for me to read it. And so when they started praying again, I became possessed. And I think it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when it started, about 5. And I just remember glimpses of what happened. I remember, you know, once I became possessed, that I was going through the house and grabbing things that were, I had everything you can imagine, occult in my house that had been consecrated to the demons that I worshipped. So I remember kind of going through drawers and, you know, pulling things out. I even remember going in the backyard and digging the dirt because I had buried, I mean, this is crazy, but I had buried one of the saints upside down. This was to, you know, to sell the house, or just crazy things that we did. Everything you can imagine, you know. Besides this, we can talk later about other things that I practiced that I believed in, you know, palm reading and tarot cards and all that stuff. So I had all that stuff in my house. I had books, I had CDs, I had images, the beads, whatever you can imagine. It was all over my house, saturated, things on the wall. So the whole process was going through and clearing this, and this demon refused to go. It was a big battle. And most of what I got, like I said, I had glimpses, kind of like in a dream, I remember some things clearly, other things I don't remember at all. Because my sister was there, and of course the pastor and his wife, they told me later what happened. But the craziest thing that happened was when the spirit was cast out, and I remember the yelling of, you know, the pastor saying in the name of Jesus Christ, get out. And it was a final, because he was trying throughout this time, throughout the deliverance process, he was trying, and the demon refused to leave. It was my entire life, you know. It was, so when he yelled that, I remember this clearly, that I felt my body kind of like go up, and not kind of, my body went up in the air backwards like this. And it was in
Wow.
a hallway. I had a long hallway, and I felt my body just flying backwards, and it flew a few feet back like this. And when I fell, you know, on my back, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to crash my head on the tile. It was all tile. It was so crazy, because Alex, I can't even tell you. I fell, and as soon as I fell, something was just like exploded, like out. Like I never felt. I opened my eyes. I was still laying down on the floor, and I looked up, and I'm looking around, and literally my entire life, there was like this veil that was like, everything was kind of like dark that was lifted, and it was, I never saw so much brightness in my life, so much color in my life. I just looked around like, and I felt so light. I felt so happy, and I accepted Christ, of course, and I just never. Oh, so I looked at the clock, and when I looked at the clock, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. So 8 hours had passed, and
Wow.
I swear, I mean, God is my witness. I know we're not supposed to swear, but to God, but God is my witness that throughout this time, when I opened my eyes, I figured it had been about 2 hours. You feel the time pass, when you're, no, I could not believe 8 hours, that all this took 8 hours. And normally it doesn't. Normally, people are delivered with a prayer. It happens differently, just like in the Bible, just like these examples that I gave you. Jesus does everybody. He doesn't have a format. He doesn't have a formula to, this prayer, do this, do that, use this, do that. No, he delivers us. He heals us the way he wants to do it and the way that he needs to do it. So it took 8 hours for me. And some people say it shouldn't take so long, it should be immediate. But maybe it was still my resistance, that was still allowing the spirit to possess me. I don't know. But I can tell you that's what it took. It was 8 hours, but I never felt so much joy. Because since I was a little girl, I guess I had never really experienced real joy. Of course, I was very happy when my children were born, when I got married, these things. But this was different. It was a different kind of just beautiful light sensation that came over me, that it was the Holy Spirit. And my husband came home, and they were waiting, my sister, the kids were sleeping, and finally my husband came home, and my son, like I said, my son was a teenager, and there were like bags and bags and bags of filled with stuff that was in these trash bags, and they were, my sister put them all in the garage that we were going to burn because they're all, consecrated to the demonic. And when my husband walked in, he was angry because first of all, he felt like it took so long and what happened, and nobody had called anybody during that time because he said, don't call because, you don't want to interrupt anything. So we only called after it was over. And when my husband walked in the house, he smelled smoke because literally the house was filled with the smell of smoke, like sulfur smell. And because, spirits can do that. They can leave scents, to make people think of their loved ones, the perfume or cigarette smoke. But this was like horrible smoke smell. And he saw smoke. My husband, when he walked in, he said there was smoke in the house. We're like, okay. I said, no, this the pastor said, this is from the deliverance. This is literally, you're smelling there was a lot of warfare going on here. And my husband didn't listen to him. He said, there's fire. Something's burning. He literally pulled the refrigerator away from the wall to look. He thought we had like a wire was burning. That's how strong the smell was.
Wow.
So we were like amazed. And after that was done, it took a little while for everybody to understand what happened, including myself. All I know is that I was free. I had never felt free in my life. And this was, it started on Saturday before Easter. And so it went into 2 o'clock in the morning, which was Easter. So by the time the pastor left, it was probably 3. I went to bed, took a shower, went to bed. I don't know, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said he was going to be at the lakefront in Kissimmee. They're going to have a sunrise service that started, I think it started at 7. I don't remember. And with the Methodist Church, if I wanted to go, he was going to be there. And I never went to a service before in my life, much less a sunrise service. And I thought, well, I never wake up early because, I'm a night person, and this was like already the next morning. And I said, well, if I wake up and, I'll go. And I did. I woke up, 2-3 hours later, ran, took a shower, ran and went to the lakefront and and saw my first sunrise service right after my deliverance and, accepting Christ. So it was such a blessing. It was such a beautiful, just, present from the Lord that we don't deserve it. We don't deserve anything that he gives us because we're so, like he says, dirty rags, that in the Bible, but he's so loving and so merciful and graceful that was my walk in Christ from then on. I've been
Yeah.
serving him.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that the timing of that, how it lined up with Resurrection Day like that. Absolutely phenomenal. Like you said, what a gift.
Yeah, it was. I mean, any day would have been a gift, but to have that, it was powerful. It was very powerful.
Oh, I can only imagine, and just so thankful that you were delivered, and what a crazy experience. And we've had some people on here before as we've discussed their deliverance process, but just I don't think I've ever had somebody say that they were literally thrown back like that, and then to not. I believe you said you didn't even feel the pain that you should have felt with that tile.
Nothing.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, nothing. I thought I was gonna, go to the emergency room because I could feel myself flying backwards, and nothing. I had nothing.
Wow.
I just woke up feeling like, wow. They say you're a new creature in Christ, new creation in Christ, and I was, and I think we all are once we accept Christ, and we're delivered from all the, the if you're involved in any type of anything that doesn't glorify God, you may not necessarily be possessed, but you will definitely oppressed. You definitely have demonic oppression surrounding you and got in and messing with your mind. So
Right. Yep. So any kind of sin, unfortunately, it's a doorway to the enemy, and the more you do it, I believe the bigger that door gets. Whether that's spirit, practicing other types of spiritual practices outside of Christianity or relationship with God, or um, having a substance abuse issue, whatever that is, you're going to be opening up doorways.
I believe that drugs definitely open up doorways to demonic.
Yeah. There's a great overlap there. There's no doubt about it. And you have mentioned this a little bit already. Looking back now at your time in Umbanda spiritism is very alarming and eye opening for you as you look now at the current landscape of especially American media and so quote social justice causes, because one of the more fascinating things as it relates to Umbanda spiritism is that it correlates so much with like you were saying, Beyonce, and even I'm sure many people would be surprised by this, but you have an excellent article written about this on your blog, and we'll give that out at the end where people can find that blog so people can read it for themselves. But with the Black Lives Matter movement, the people I'm sure would be very surprised to understand how much all of this overlaps, but it does. And so can you take us through how you have come to find out that what you were practicing there in Brazil with Umbanda spiritism and what you see now in the current landscape in social justice and entertainment has overlapped so much?
Yes. Going back to the African roots of Ifa from the Yoruba people in West Africa that practice Ifa is the same practice that we've been talking about, Umbanda or Voodoo or Candomblé, Kimbanda, or Santeria. And there are other names, but these are the most common ones. So Ifa is the main religion in Africa. So what surprised me when I started reading different articles about Black Lives Matters, and I made the connection, I had no idea either, that they worship the dead. And we'll share the link to my article, and it explains, I believe it very clearly, the whole how it links. But the founders of Black Lives Matters practice Ifa, the this religion, that they believe in spirit communication, they believe in communicating with the dead, without getting into much detail of what it is and what they do, because it's very similar to everything we already talked about. They before every time that we saw on TV that they were having their they called their protests. Every time they had their protests, especially after George Floyd was killed, they always have they offer libations, which is offering like drinks to the spirits, and they have a ceremony prior to starting their protests, because they practice Ifa. They practice this spiritual religion that believes in contacting the dead. So again, without getting into too much detail, they, with their own mouths, they talk about how this movement is a spiritual movement. So people need to realize how dangerous this is. We're following people. A lot of Christians are following Black Lives Matter, because of course Black Lives Matters. Nobody's saying that they, and what happened to George Floyd was horrible. Nobody would, or anybody that gets killed by the police. It's not, we're not talking politics here. Any Christian, they're not going to agree that, these things are good, or that, people should be treated differently because of their race or their color or their religion. No. But what happens is people fall into this social, like you said, the social justice mentality, and they think they're doing a good thing, but they're literally coming into a spiritual bondage, because they're participating in a ritual. Unknowingly they are, because they're protesting, but they're participating in a spiritual ritual that was started before the cameras even started rolling. They do other things, besides libations. You see people with sage and doing incense and offerings and flowers and all this other stuff that we do in these other religions, and we did in what I practice. But the scariest thing is that when they say, and this is from their mouths, these are quotes from them that I have in my article. When they say, call his name or call her name, and they call these people's names, when they were chanting George Floyd's name or whoever was killed, that they were chanting, they're not honoring the people. Like I believe most Americans believe that they are honoring the lives. No, they're literally calling on the spirits of these people, calling on the spirit of the dead to come and participate in this protest. And we know as Christians that to die once, then comes judgment. And there's no way in the Bible that says our spirits come back to earth. Once we die, God's going to decide whether, we go to hell, or we stay with him forever. There's no coming back. There's no reincarnation. That we always strongly believed in reincarnation before I became a Christian. That was part of my belief system. That's part of Umbanda. That's part of the Ifa belief system that BLM leaders believe. So they're calling on these spirits, believing that it's the spirits that they're contacting spirits of these people that died, when they're actually calling on demons. So of course, all this turned to chaos, because people can get possessed by, just, you're inviting demons to be part of this. They're everywhere anyways. They're not very polite. They don't really need invitation to do a lot of things. But this is, a ritual to have many, many people bow down to Satan and worship him, because that's what, the Bible says, you're not to to contact the dead. It's, it's an abomination to the Lord. And that's what they're doing. And I think we talked about Beyonce practices this, her husband, and I have many other people in my book, in my blog, and different articles that openly practice this type of faith, this type of religion. They call Ifa here, same thing. Umbanda, no difference. So it's being introduced into the culture through, music, through social justice, politics. And the scary thing is that people are just being, like that story they say about the frog, you put the frog in the water and then slowly start to boil the water. They never feel it get hot enough to jump out. It's a slow process and they die. I think that's what's happening with America. The fabric of America just has become so contaminated with these spiritual beliefs that are real, that are dangerous. And kids are practicing it, like kids that look up to Beyonce. There are websites that teach kids how to channel the deities that Beyonce worships, and that she becomes possessed to become, beautiful, to get this, to get that. And kids are doing witchcraft. They're learning to do, potions. And I mean, from Harry Potter to Disney, everything has to do with there's a cult behind it. It's cute, some of this. It's we talked about that, how in America, like most countries that I mentioned, Africa, Brazil, Caribbean, we practice these things as religion. This is our religion. But here in America, it's introduced as entertainment. So it's introduced through song, through culture, through TV, movies, literature, and now openly in politics through, BLM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's very dangerous, very dangerous.
It is. And it comes back to the enemy being very, very patient, very smart, because he's been studying us for so long. And I think you even see a little bit of this in the Bible, like in the Old Testament, very patient with incorporating these other spiritual belief systems into ancient Israel. So, so patient that it was just here and there in Israel where people were practicing these different spiritual beliefs. And all of a sudden you go from here and there to the people that were supposed to be taking care of the temple, the most high priests in ancient Israel were all of a sudden doing pagan practices in the temple of God. And it really reminds me of that. I just think that once again, Satan is very subtly inserting these different practices into our culture. Like you said, much more now, I think, through entertainment and through social justice. And it extends to everything. And it goes to new age as well, yoga.
Yes.
I even think you can talk about like drug use. Really since the 60s, it seems like it just continues to ramp up just a little bit every decade, where it becomes more mainstream. And of course, witchcraft is all over mainstream entertainment, whether that's through Harry Potter or different types of video games or movies and things like that. And what that does is, I'm not saying that everybody that watches these things or plays these things are of the devil or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that it familiarizes people and gets people comfortable with it. And all of a sudden, you might buy yourself a book of spells, or you might start checking out the horoscopes, and it's just very subtle. And that turns into, okay, there's never enough. I want a little bit more. I want a little bit more, especially for people that are lacking any kind of spirituality in their lives, because we're spiritual beings. We need to have that relationship with God. And if that's not there, which unfortunately for many people now it's not, they're going to find something else to replace that with, whether that's the Black Lives Matter movement and the spiritual roots behind that, and people not realizing that, Beyonce entertainment, seductive aspects of that entertainment, like Beyonce's, like you said, calling on these beings in the middle of performances, that is seductive to people. People, even if they don't realize that there's a spiritual background behind it, there's an allure there, just like we've been talking about before with your own spiritual practices growing up, that I think is seductive to people. and without realizing it, they're opening up doorways to these different types of spiritualities, and it's very, I think it's scary, and I think it especially, it just reinforces the idea that we need to come back to that foundation of truth that I think, like you said, the fabric of America is slowly slipping away from in the Judeo-Christian understanding and foundation.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yes. You mentioned yoga, which is a big thing. People don't realize how dangerous that is. Even churches offer yoga. And I forgot to give you, there's a website for people there's a lot of resources. It's www.thetruelight.net. And Pastor Mike Shreve has a lot of teaching on that. He used to be a yoga guru in the 70s, and he has excellent teachings, and his testimony is very powerful. I have it in Portuguese in my blog, but in this website, my testimony's there, and his and many other, because we talked about Ouija board being dangerous, all these things that people play with just for fun. It's not. It's a very dangerous. You're opening up to demonic spirits, contacting demonic spirits through these means. Ouija board, the tarot cards, palm readings, all these things. You mentioned horoscopes. All these things open up to. It takes us away from God and opens up doors to demons.
Yeah. And again, very seductive, very alluring. But ultimately, like you said, comes at a cost. Even if you're getting some kind of what seems to be a benefit at the beginning, always comes at a cost in the end. And fortunately, myself and many other people had to learn that the hard way. So that I don't say that, and I'm sure Ivani's the same. We don't mean to say it in any condemning way. We're just trying to look out for people so they don't experience some of the hardships that we've gone through.
Yeah, it's not condemnation. It's out of love, because you don't want anybody to go through the pain of being, taken to being deceived. I guess that's the best word we can use, is being deceived.
Exactly.
From God, yeah.
So let's get into the book that you came out with this year, a novel called Cast Out. So if you could go ahead and give us an understanding of what this book is about and your inspiration for writing it.
Okay. The book, it's Cast Out, Chronicles of a Familiar Spirit. I was inspired to write it many years ago after I became, I was saved, I was delivered, and became a Christian. I wanted to tell not just my story, but the story of my ancestors and their spiritual walk with spiritism. And I wanted my children to understand, the immigration process as well, because, we have a long history of immigration. So I started writing the book, and it never worked for years. It took me about 18 years to complete the manuscript. But finally, I was inspired after reading the Screw Tape Letters and This Present Darkness. Those two books inspired me to show the spiritual realm with the physical, to make people understand, help people understand more how the demonic and how the spiritual works behind the scenes. So because of the mostly C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters, I started writing the book in demon's point of view, which is very difficult to do. But I remained biblical throughout the book. I read, there's a lot of biblical verses within. It's fiction, obviously, but it's based on 100 years history of how my family became immigrants from Europe to South America and North America. So it entails a 100-year history, and it shows all the practices that were deceitful, why they were deceitful, how it happened, and how we eventually were saved, delivered, and came to Christ. So I'm excited about it. I know it's a long book, and I think it's a little hard to get to the beginning because it starts off a little because of it's not backstory, but it does go back. It starts in 1997 when I was delivered, and it goes back to 1897. So it kind of goes back and forth, and he's telling the story of kind of connecting the dots of the whole process of eventually, of course, he's cast out, but it's his chronicles, and he's he's telling the story of this family. And of course, I don't use real names, but it was not easy to write, but I'm working on the edits for the Portuguese translation right now. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the concept of the book and the inspiration behind it being the screw tape letters and writing it from the enemy's vantage point. I think that's really, really cool. And like you said, even if it's challenging, it's an awesome vantage point to view things from. And I think a really intriguing one. And I've read a little bit of the beginning so far, and I can't wait to finish the book. But even from what I've read, I can tell you're a fantastic writer. And I was saying this before we started recording. I don't get to use my degree very much. I have a bachelor's degree in creative writing. So what I'm saying, there's actually a 4-year degree behind that. So
wow,
you really are a great writer.
thank you.
And I can I can tell that in your book. I can tell in Cast Out. I can tell that in your testimony book as well. So I think people will really enjoy that. And I also was going to ask you as well, just because there are other people I'm sure that are also interested in writing. And with your experience now, having finished a novel, no easy feat at all. How did you get through those difficult processes or those difficult moments when you've kind of hit that writer's block, so to speak? How did you overcome that?
Well, there are many times you need someone that's going to be your. My whole family supported my idea of writing this book, and were very patient and prayed and fasted throughout the years for me, and they never allowed me to give up. So it's important to have support, friends or writing group support. And I had my aunt who translated every chapter, and she kept me, if I took too long to write, which I did, she would always, encourage me, don't give up. Don't. And there were many times that I just I just didn't know how I was going to finish this. There was it was just very spiritual warfare. You mentioned Mark. I'm good friends with Mark Hanneman. When he wrote the book, how he was attacked, physically attacked while at the keyboard. They don't want stories of the truth to come out as far as deliverance, and how deceiving these teachings from the occult, new age, spiritism are. So you're going to have warfare, but there's no need to fear, because as long as you're doing it for Christ, which you are, the main point is, when I wrote the book, I didn't write it for my glory, it's for God's glory, and for praying that people that read it, that need to understand and seek Jesus Christ, and leave any of the occult behind, hopefully will be inspired by the book to do that. So that was my driving force throughout, was that it wasn't, oh, I want, to sell and become a best, because there's so many people writing nowadays, and that's not the point. The point is for God to use it for his glory, and have people that pray for you and with you. Always search God and ask for direction, and do it, because stories need to be told. And I think more and more people are, it's amazing how the past few years, even I think maybe 10 years ago, you didn't hear people talking about deliverance openly, or their experiences with the demonic. That was almost taboo. I don't know. I mean, there it was, but not as much as now. People are coming out and sharing their stories, and the more people share, the more other people will be aware. So I think it's very important to write, and I think everyone should, and especially, including yourself. I know that you're going to school right now, but I'm sure you have fascinating testimony, and that all that does is help, because it tells in the Bible that there's a verse in the Bible to tell your what Jesus did for you. So write the vision, make it plain. It's important.
Yeah, I
Don't give
agree.
up. Whatever you do, never give up. Just keep asking God's direction, and you'll get through it.
Yeah, really well stated. And again, I think it's really important as well to highlight books such as yours, because we see so many, like we were talking about before, books from the other side, the enemy. There's so many people incorporating his themes into entertainment. So almost every single person loves to be entertained. They love a good story. And so the fact that you have a book that is doing what we see so much from the other side, from the enemy's vantage point, with truth and themes of truth in there, I think that's exactly what we need right now. We need more of what you're doing right now in order to get the truth out there, because unfortunately there's many people that are just not going to seek the truth out, maybe in many of the ways that you or myself would, but they would be much more inclined to read a book or a novel, or seek out a movie with these types of themes. So I really, really appreciate what you're doing, and I just hope that it continues to bless people. And I hope that, even though this was very challenging, that it doesn't deter you from doing any future work like this if you're interested in it, because this is just so needed right now.
Yes, thank you so much.
Of course, yeah. And I want to make sure that we give people an opportunity to find out where the book is at. We'll do that right now. It is on Amazon, called Cast Out. Again, this is the cover here, Cast Out. And I am not sure. I want to ask Ivani real quick. Do you have a place where people can buy the testimony book as well that you have?
Yes, the testimony is also on Amazon, but my website, which will be, I think by the time you put this online, my website should be ready, and you can download a free copy of the testimony booklet. It'll be in English, and there's a version in Portuguese. The
Like
other
this here?
place, yeah. The other place you can get the book at is at, and if you want a physical copy of the little booklet, the testimony booklet, is also on Amazon, but also Deeper Revelation Books. That's who published my book, and they have a bookstore as well. There'll be a link on my website for that, and also to download it for free.
And real quick, for those who are listening and not watching, the website is just her name, IvaniGreppi.com. So IVANIGREPPI.com. I will also include that in the description of this, so you can just click on the link.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. And I want to show people as well. We had talked about the blog where people can read the article that we had talked about as relates to Umbanda spiritism and BLM and many other interesting topics as well. That's going to be there on the screen, IvaniGreppi.wordpress.com.
That's it.
Also, you had mentioned before, I want to make sure people can find it's just the truthlight.net. I believe you said that was Mike Shree's website. Is that right?
Yes, and he has different people's testimonies there. There are some videos, some audio, and mine is on, if you go to writings, written stories, my testimony's there. And he also has, he did, and I think we're going to try and put this up on our, on the website, but he did an interview with me regarding Black Lives Matters. And then he wrote an article based on my article to Charisma Magazine. They published that online.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, and there's another ministry. Oh my gosh. They have an excellent article. I'll send you the link to that regarding BLM. I actually use their article for reference. I quote parts of their article. So it was one of my research, different articles that I researched.
Yeah.
Their Midwest Christian Outreach.
Oh, okay.
They have a great article on that. And the pastor that wrote it and his wife, oh my God, I'm so horrible with names. Oh my gosh. I'll get that to you. But Midwest Christian outreach.
Okay. Sounds
Pastor Don, I can't remember his last name.
that's
Vino,
okay.
Vinot. Sorry. Yeah.
Awesome. No problem. I will include that in the description as well. And I want to give people an opportunity to, if they would like to, they can contact you via Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just type her name in, Ivani Greppy, and you'll be able to find her at those different social media outlets. So, Ivani, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This has been
Thank you.
absolutely fascinating, enlightening, and really powerful. And again, just so thankful that you did not yourself, you didn't give up through all those really difficult experiences, and now are able to use those challenging times throughout your childhood to now help other people by the grace of God. So, just want to thank you and commend you for everything that you're doing for the kingdom and spreading truth.
Thank you, Alex, and God bless you and your ministry. Thank you for doing this. This is, wonderful. I've been watching a lot of your videos. They're very edifying, and just, to have younger people do what you're doing, it's a blessing. And I just pray that God continues to use you in its ministry as well.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, that is the show for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. A reminder to send in your testimony, your new age to Jesus testimony, your near-death experience, your miraculous encounter, your miraculous healing. Maybe you have an encounter with an angel or demon, whatever that is. Feel free to send that to me. Also, just a reminder, I'm taking suggestions as well. So if you have someone's video that you would like me to check out, or maybe another testimony that you found on another website somewhere as a suggestion to try to get that person on, love to hear that as well. Feel free to send me your testimony, either just something real quick written out, or a video, or a suggestion to spiritanswerspodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to send in your prayer request there as well, or feel free to comment below with any prayer requests. And we also love having prayer requests at our Facebook group. That's just Spirit Answers at Facebook. That's all it is, just Spirit Answers. Just type that in, you'll be able to find us. Always looking to pray for people. And just want to remind you as well, if you feel so led, in the description below, there is an opportunity to donate to the podcast. The podcast takes several hours a week. Unfortunately, that time is taken away from other things that I could be working on as it relates to school and my career. So if you feel led, thank you so much for any amount that you feel led to donate. And if you don't donate anything, that's perfectly fine as well. I just am so appreciative of everything that you do to support the show, and just appreciate your time in listening. And just as always, I will be praying for you and all the other listeners out there as well. Also, I want to be able to take the time too this week to speak to people that are not sure about this whole God thing. Maybe you heard Ivani's testimony today and were touched in a way that you weren't expected to be. Maybe you're thinking maybe there is something to this whole God thing. And if that is you, I'd ask for you to take the time here over the next, we'll just say at least several weeks, give God some time to reveal himself to you. And I would ask you to ask God to reveal himself to you in a way that is personal to you, in a way that you would be able to understand. And I guarantee you that if you are looking for answers, you're looking for truth, you will find your truth in God. It will happen eventually. Just sometimes you just have to be persistent. And I just think that once you do that, even if it does take a little bit more time than what you would like, you are going to find that life has never felt the way that it will once you have that relationship with God. There will be a peace that you've never felt before, and there's nothing like having a relationship with the creator of the universe. So that is all I have for you guys this week. Thanks again for taking the time to tune in. I really appreciate, again, everything that you do to support us, and I look forward to seeing you next Thursday right here, same time. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye.